Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. Great to have you with us on this Tuesday. Dave Revson and Trey Demps. We had a night off from hoops last night to make way for the football. We got two games tonight. They could not possibly help but to be more compelling than the football game was last night.
Yeah, I mean, that football game was not fun to watch. I turned it off after the first half. But, yeah, I mean, we got two great games here tonight. I mean, the league has been as good as it's ever been, top to bottom. When you look at the bottom of the conference, I mean, these teams are really competing at a high level. So you got to bring it night in and night out.
We'll dive into those games later, but I want to follow up on the point you're making right there in terms of the depth of the league. That is today's big story. We mentioned yesterday just two teams are ranked. It's easy to forget sometimes the rankings are irrelevant in terms of the postseason. The net is a much better gauge, and you see four Big Ten teams are in the top 25 there. Purdue joined by Ohio State, Rutgers, and Indiana. But what is interesting is exactly what Trey was just talking about. That is the depth. Everyone aside from Minnesota is in the top 85. So you've got 13 teams that, at least theoretically, are still in the discussion for the NCAA tournament over these next 2 months. 8 teams in the top 50. That includes Maryland, Iowa, Northwestern. You see Wisconsin, they're ranked 18th. They're all the way down at 56. So there's some pretty serious discrepancies between what the pollsters think of some of these Big Ten teams and what the computers think of these Big Ten teams. Interestingly, one team that is getting the poll respect is Wisconsin, not necessarily getting the respect from the computers. But I think there's a theme here, Trey. I want to dive into some of these teams individually, and let's start with the Badgers. They lost to Illinois on Saturday, but did so without Tyler Wall. We've got some teams battling some injuries. Let's start with Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think when you look at Wisconsin, it really changes the dynamic of what they do without Tyler Wall on both ends of the floor, right? I mean, offensively, they play through him in the post, and he is second in the conference in usage rate over Jalen Pickett. I mean, he's only behind Zach Edey in usage rate, so they really rely on him. He averages 13 points per game. He gets a lot of hockey assists where he's playing out of the post, guys are cutting, you get the swing and reversal, you get open looks from the perimeter. You think about last game, Wisconsin shot 8 of 29 from 3, just because they're not getting the same looks offensively that they would normally get with Tyler Wall on the floor. And then on the defensive end as well, he's able to switch out and guard perimeter players. When you look at Carter Gilmore and some of the guys, Marcus Ilver, that they play at the 4, those guys aren't able to switch out and guard perimeter players, and they're not as skilled and experienced in guarding ball screen action, so it's affected them on both ends of the floor.
I am really surprised, by the way, that the computers don't like them more than they do. I mean, this is a team that's 5-2 in quad 1 and 2 games. They have some really good wins, so a little surprising, but again, you do know that the committee does take into account injuries, and so not to take anything away from Illinois, who I think is really, really good and is going to be an NCAA tournament team, but the committee will know that Wisconsin played that game without Tyler Wall. How about Ohio State? A similar situation here, missing Zed Key in that game over the weekend.
Yeah, this was a team that was starting to separate themselves from the rest of the pack, because, I mean, for a while, it looked like 2 from 13 was pretty equal. They were pretty interchangeable parts. And now all of a sudden, Ohio State is kind of back into that ranking where it's like you could put them as the second best team in the Big Ten, or you could put them as the 9th best team in the Big Ten, just depending on the day. And when you lose a guy like Zed Key, it changes, once again, a lot of what you do. You know, you're not able to just throw it into the block and get an easy bucket from the post. Like, he's a guy that can finish over both shoulders. But I think the biggest area that they really struggle is rebounding the basketball. Their last 2 games, they've gotten out-rebounded by 11, and they got out-rebounded by 12 against a Maryland team that doesn't have a ton of size. So I think it's really, really going to be an interesting thing to see kind of how they play in the perimeter, or in the paint, and then also within the half-court offense without Zed Key.
They're the #1 most efficient offense in the country, according to KenPom. KenPom's got them 12th in their computer ranking. So, again, it is interesting, some of these disparities here. I think Indiana's going to be really interesting. Lost at home to Northwestern this week in a game they trailed really from start to finish. They also have injuries. They did not have Race Thompson. That seems like a shorter-term issue than Xavier Johnson. But it's pretty clear from listening to Trace Jackson-Davis in the postgame, he really called out his team and said just didn't follow the scouting report at all defensively.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a complete identity shift of this team without Xavier Johnson and Race Thompson. They're becoming more of an offensive-minded team. When you talk about Tamar Bates, Jalen Hood-Schifino, those guys are capable defenders, but they really hang their hats on the offensive end. I mean, the last 2 games, they've given up 87 points per game, and teams are shooting almost 50% from the field against them. And so when you take that into account, and the fact that you have a lot of younger guys that are getting minutes, CJ Gunn is getting extended minutes, it's just the understanding and valuing each possession, especially on the defensive end of the floor. I mean, this Indiana team, we're used to seeing whole teams in the 60s, and now they're playing kind of in the 70s, 80s, and 90s even. I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of how Mike Woodson wants to kind of create an identity for this team, because they have good offensive talent, but you've got to really hang your hat on the defensive end, because that's what this team's been about.
We saw a glimpse of how good they can be against North Carolina. Again, we just have not really seen that consistently. I do want to put it a little bit in the context of the NCAA tournament, because for better or for worse, I do think a lot of what we do in college basketball is a precursor to that. There is so much excitement and buzz surrounding that tournament. So here's what Mike DeCourcy, who is our resident bracketologist, has. He has 11 Big Ten teams either in the tourney or among the first 8 teams out. And this speaks to a lot of what we've been discussing. There may only be one great team in the Big Ten as of right now. There are a lot of really good ones. Again, this doesn't even include Michigan. They have a damaging loss to Central Michigan, but that's a team that's beaten Maryland and Penn State, that is an All-American center in Hunter Dickinson. Jet Howard's probably going to be an NBA player. There's a ton of talent on that team. I think Nebraska has shown, taking Purdue to overtime, how good they could be. So you got 13 teams kind of in this discussion. It is clear, as well, highlight a couple of those teams, that Purdue has separated themselves, and they are playing the rest of the way here for a number 1 seed.
Yeah, and obviously it's because of Zach Edey. He's been the player of the year. He's a guy that has really improved his durability. He's playing 30 minutes per game. He's playing well on the defensive end. I don't think he's getting enough credit for how well, especially in pick and roll defense, he's able to get out on the perimeter a little bit more and utilize his length and guard against perimeter players when they're coming off the ball screen action. But I think it's the guard play. It kind of almost looked like the freshman guards were going to hit that freshman slump. They had a couple rough games where they didn't shoot the ball well. Braden Smith had 2 kind of subpar games. And then all of a sudden, you're on the road against Ohio State after that Rutgers loss, and Braden Smith explodes and, is kind of the key difference maker down the stretch. Fletcher Lawyer makes the game-winning shot. And so these guys are just different. They're not typical freshmen. They've been in big moments. Both of those guys have, come from storied high school programs, and it shows. They're ready for the moment. And I don't know if we'll see from those 2 guys kind of that freshman slump that we normally see from freshmen, because of how poised they are and how well they've been coached.
6 quad 1 wins for them. I know you want to touch briefly on Northwestern. Wildcats have been one of the hottest teams in the Big Ten over these last couple games. Mike has them out right now. About half the brackets online have them in. What will it take for this to be a tourney team?
I think offensively, I think it's the biggest thing, because they can hang their hat on the defensive end. They do a great job. They're able to switch 1 through 4. They keep teams out of the paint. They're able to play physically without fouling. So they're going to be great on the defensive end. I think it's just shot making. They made shots against Indiana. They got, going from the 3-point line, because this isn't a team that's going to be able to throw the ball into the paint, into the post and get anything offensively. Matt Nicholson's a great player, but he's just not there offensively right now. And so this is going to be a perimeter-oriented team. They're going to take a ton of threes, and so they got to be able to knock down those threes. They got to get meaningful paint touches and get good looks on the perimeter.
Their guards were absolutely phenomenal against Indiana. Chase Audige on the defensive end has really been something else. Not sure anyone in the Big Ten had a better week than the Iowa Hawkeyes. They rallied from 21 points down on Thursday to top Indiana, 3rd largest comeback in school history. Followed that up by winning in one of the most difficult road environments in the nation, topping Rutgers by 11 Sunday. All of this without their 3rd leading scorer, Patrick McCaffery, who is taking an indefinite leave of absence from competition due to anxiety. Which gets us to our big interview. The head coach of the Hawks, Fran McCaffery, is with us. Coach, what did you learn about your team this week?
I think we learned a lot. We had a number of individuals step up big time. I think you learn a lot about this league and how difficult it is. Every team is good. Every team is prepared. The ability to execute a game plan consistently well is not easy to do. We did that really well against Rutgers. Our offensive execution was terrific against what is arguably the best defensive team in college basketball. I think we showed some incredible resilience to come back down 21. If you watch the beginning of that game, we were disjointed. We were We were not playing well. Trace was on fire, and we had to get settled down. The good news is we still had 34 minutes or so with which to do that, and the kids stayed together. So I think it showed a lot of maturity, Dave. To answer your question, the veteran guys, I thought, Philip and Chris and Connor, and Tony and Peyton and Aaron Eulis, they're our experienced guys. They played that way, and that's what you have to do consistently well in this league to survive.
I think what was most impressive to me, Coach, was that you were coming off 3 straight losses, and then it doesn't start well, as you said, against Indiana. How do you get a team to kind of refocus midstream like that?
Well, I wish I could tell you that it was some miraculous thing that myself and our coaches did. I did jump them in that one timeout. I don't do that a lot. I do that sometimes, just to get their attention and try to get them to refocus. But ultimately, it comes down to, as I said, the resiliency and the experience, but also the basketball IQ. Because when you start off slowly, you're going to make some changes to what the original game plan was. And that's something that is harder to do than I think people think. You're making changes on the fly, and they responded. Our crowd was helpful in that stretch, and what you're trying to do is get it back to a manageable number, a 3 or 4 possession game, which we did, and then we took it from there, ended up getting the victory. So you're right. I mean, 2 really bad performances. We got outplayed, by Eastern Illinois and Nebraska. Couldn't make a shot against Nebraska, but they were really good. At least we fought back against Penn State, so you're feeling like, okay, coming into Indiana, we'll have a little bit of momentum in terms of how we're playing, and then the horrible start. So I just credit the guys for staying together, and also I think we got great production off the bench.
Well, you had a player in Peyton Sanford really step up in that game against Rutgers, and he had been struggling mightily with a shot. And all you have to do is attend one shoot-around to know what a great shooter he is. Yeah. What's the challenge as a coach when a player who has seen so much success shooting the ball through his career is in a prolonged slump like he is? How do you kind of keep him coming back and keep him focused?
Well, I think, a lot of people have different philosophies on that. I'm just, and I've always been this way, Dave. I know he can shoot the ball. I watched him grow up, through high school, and what he did for us last year, under pressure. I mean, he hit 2 of the biggest shots of the Purdue game, the championship game in the conference tournament. It shows you what he's capable of doing. And I watched it all summer and all fall. So he gets off to a slow start. I think in his case, he's hard on himself. He's so conscientious and such a great person. So we just kept staying positive with him. Like, we kept running stuff for him. We kept encouraging him to shoot the ball. Don't stop shooting. Like, you've seen him, Dave. He'll pull up from 26 feet. And he's got the green light to do that. I did the same with Bohannon, and he could pull from anywhere at any time, early, late in the shot clock, early, late in the game. I don't ever want those guys thinking anything other than it's a great shot because I took it. That's kind of been my philosophy, and that's how I want Peyton thinking. And then when you get a guy cooking like that, it really requires, obviously, the coaching staff can run stuff for him, but it's recognition by everybody else on the floor. Hey, this guy's going. We got to load him up. And that means we get him the ball, but we also screen for him, and we get the ball to him on time in the shooting pocket, not at his ankles, not a second late because I'm looking for myself. So there's a great deal of unselfishness on behalf of the other guys on the team.
Another guy who has really stepped up for you is Philip Rebraca, who I think has become one of the better big men in the Big Ten. And you and I talked at media days. He had said last year that he thought that he was overthinking things a little bit and that he was going to change his mental approach. And you discussed at the time how you are going to help him to do that. What do you think has changed with Philip here? I mean, 10 straight double-figure games. He has become incredibly reliable for you.
Yeah, you're right, David. And I think for him, he last year he was a terrific rebounding, defending big man for us, which without him, we would not have won the championship in the tournament. We would not have won 26 games, even with Keegan Murray. We needed Filip Rebraca. What I wanted for him to be able to do was sort of think the way he did when he was at North Dakota. He was a scoring big man. So we knew it was in there, and we saw it in practice. Here he is. He's now at a different level. He's playing with both Murrays, with Connor and Patrick, with Bohannon, with Tony Perkins. I mean, we had a lot of guys that could score, and he just wanted to win. I mean, what coach doesn't love that characteristic about his guys? But my responsibility is to get the most out of him. And I knew it would also help our team tremendously. So, seeing him be totally confident, and whether he's backing his guy down or he's posting up or he's doing things in transition, if he's making plays in the open floor because we hit him on a short roll, and now he's got to play in traffic. If we're running sets, if we're flying up and down the floor in transition, he's an athlete, and he's I can tell you this: there's not going to be anybody tougher than him in any building he walks into. That's just his nature, and that's why we love him.
I do want to ask you about Chris Murray, and you mentioned Keegan and how amazing he was last year. And I think one of the things that was so remarkable to me about Keegan a year ago was that you had a National Player of the Year in Luka Garza, and now Keegan's role changed dramatically, and he stepped right into it. I mean, from the get-go, he was ready to go. And there's an obvious parallel with Keegan now moving on and being a lottery pick in the NBA, and now Chris Murray's in that same spot where you go from a role player to the focal point of the offense. You've done this several times now with players. How do you prepare players to see their role change so dramatically and to go from being a complementary player to the star?
Well, I appreciate, the question in terms of what my role is in this. But I would say this to you, Dave. It starts with they have to have the ability to do it in the first place. So then it's my responsibility to put them in positions where they can utilize their talent. But the first thing they have to do is trust their talent and be confident in their own skin and go make plays. And that's what I like about Chris. There's times when he'll have 25 and we haven't run anything for him. Now, we do run a lot of stuff for him, but I prefer that he get it sort of organically. Just get it in transition, get it off the glass and bring it. Post up, pop out, shot fake drive, and then understand how to play off 2 feet and make plays for other people when you're getting double teamed. He's a guy that, he's not a guy who hunts shots. I'll say that about him. And all of a sudden you look up and he's got 25 or 30. And we're benefiting from the fact that teams are focusing defensively on guarding him. But the thing that has impressed me the most about him this year is his rebounding. Like we lose Garza 2 years ago, we lose Keegan last year. He and Philip have done a great job on the glass. And we're not a big team across the board. So we have to get that kind of rebounding productivity. So the thing that I love about Chris this year is his commitment to winning. He's scoring, he's rebounding, he's shooting a high percentage. He's not hunting shots. He's not being selfish in any way because of what you described. Okay, he recognizes, all right, now it's my turn, and that's pressure. And I don't ever want him to feel pressure. I want him to be comfortable in our offense, in his role, and know that we believe in him. We're going to go to him, and he could miss 5 shots in a row, and we'll go to him on the 6th shot. And I think if he knows that we feel about him that way, he'll feel that way about himself.
Coach, I mentioned earlier Patrick's absence from games. You talked extensively at your news conference last week about all the external support that you've gotten and how appreciative you and your family are of that. How about internally without the team? How have, within the team, I should say, how have you seen those guys rally around Patrick?
They've been tremendous. It's a very close-knit group. He's got best friends on this team, and when it was hard for him, Dave, because he told the team first before he told anybody else. And I think you heard Phil Brabazza say, I didn't even know. And that's the problem with this a lot of times. People just keep everything inside. That's why I think it was important for him to be totally transparent. But I would say this, his teammates responded as I would have expected them to. They hugged him. They told him they loved him. And he said he would be back, when he feels better and when he's ready. And they'll welcome him back, at that time. So it was somewhat emotional, I guess you'd say, at that moment. But, it was a little bit of a surprise to a lot of guys because other than Connor, I don't think anybody knew. But he was very candid with how he felt and very committed to them because he didn't feel like he could be the best version of himself. And if he wasn't going to be the best version of himself because of how he felt, then he was letting his teammates down, and he didn't want to do that. He wants to be there for them. And he promised them at the time that, and let's face it, Dave, a lot of guys, when they take a leave of absence or they step aside, they step away. He said, I don't want to do that. I want to be around you guys. I want you to know that I'm still supporting you. I'm here. He came in yesterday and got shots up and got a lift in, and he's at practice. He made the trip to New Jersey. He was on the bench for the Indiana game. And you're right, the outpouring of support has been tremendous in terms of phone calls, emails, text messages to myself, to Margaret, to both Connor and Patrick. So we're beyond overwhelmed, but so appreciative at the outpouring of support.
Well, I know I shared this with you privately, but I'll just say publicly, everyone at the Big Ten Network obviously rooting for him. He's really set an incredible example, I think, of courage and of stepping forward and being very public about this because it is something that affects so many people, and I think a lot of people will benefit from seeing how forthright.
I certainly hope so, David. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Last thing, Coach, you got 3 straight home games coming up here, starting with your game against Michigan this week. These all feel like games that, you should be right in these games, and they're all winnable games, certainly. What are you looking for from your team here in this home stretch as you try to get yourselves back solidly in that NCAA tournament conversation?
Yeah, I think every coach in a situation like this is looking for one thing. They're looking for consistency of effort and performance, connectivity. We say this every year, Dave, you and I, and anybody that I'm talking to at the Big Ten Network, how tough this league is top to bottom. And, there have been years when we've had 7, 8 teams in the top, 30, 9, 10 teams in the top 30 sometimes. And that's impressive. But I think this year, above all, the top to bottom explanation is probably more appropriate than it's ever been. So it's kind of like, doesn't matter who you play. It doesn't matter if you're home or on the road. You better come with it and be connected and consistently perform and not turn the ball over and rebound, all these things that we talk about, or you have no chance. And so it's not like you say, hey, we got 3 in a row at home, we'll be fine. No, you won't be fine. You'll be fine if you play well and you play together and you play hard and you make shots and you share the ball and you move without the ball and you screen for people. Well, then maybe you'll be okay. But you can't look at a schedule and say we got 3 home games in a row. That means 0 to me, and it needs to mean 0 to the players.
Well, Coach, I will see you for one of those home games coming up on Sunday.
I look forward to it. I'll see you Sunday, Dave.
Looking forward to it as Iowa takes on Maryland here on the Big Ten Network. Coach, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Congrats on a really good week for the Hawkeyes.
Thanks so much, Dave. See you Sunday, my man.
A little update on Patrick McCaffery. Actually tweeted this out yesterday saying he had been off of Twitter but wanted to come back and thank everyone for their support. It means the world to my family and I. I'm taking this time to find peace, and we'll be back on the court with my brothers when I am ready. And then by the way, the Hawks are hot. Ohio State still perfect on the women's side, 17-0, thanks in large part to the heroics of Taylor Mikesell, named the Big Ten Player of the Week yesterday, poured in 31 points Sunday as the Bucks rallied from a 17-point second-half deficit to top an excellent Illinois team. Also a 22.7 boards, 7 assists in a win over Minnesota, playing all 80 minutes in those two games. And Taylor Mikesell joins us now, 17-0. Taylor, that is the best start in school history. It's the best for any Big Ten team in nearly 30 years. What's been the best part of this ride for you so far?
I think the best part about this ride is just enjoying it with my teammates. You know, you said 17-0 has a nice ring to it, but I think 18-0 would be better. And then just stacking wins and stacking days. Right now we have another big test against Nebraska on Saturday, so getting ready for that.
I do want to look ahead to the Nebraska game, but man, that Illinois game on Sunday was something else. You guys, as I mentioned, down 17 in the second half. The game really seemed to kind of change on a dime. What did you feel out there in terms of the momentum shifting?
Yeah, I mean, in the first half, we kind of let them get comfortable. Didn't really impose our will at all on the defensive end. You know, kind of made that shift going into the third quarter, knowing that we were going to have to change some things because they're a really good team, really well coached, and they came ready to play. But credit to our defense and our press gave them a little bit of trouble, and then we started getting shots to fall.
What's remarkable to me is that you guys have done all of this without two of your best players, J.C. Sheldon and Madison Green, who happen to play the same position as well. So two of your better players, and then you're without kind of who you thought would be your point guards coming into the year. How have you seen this team adapt to their absences?
Yeah, just a credit to our flexibility and just ability to play multiple positions. You know, losing Madison and JC is not easy shoes to fill. You know, that's not one person's job to fill their shoes or their role. It's going to be all 13 of us filling in little pieces of what they do. You know, and then just using their leadership and their voice from the sideline as well has helped us a lot. Me and Ricky having to step into the point guard hasn't been easy, but JC and Madison have really helped just kind of help us into that role and just help us see like the game from that perspective.
You are an Ohio native. You started your career at Maryland. You were Big Ten Freshman of the Year. You then transferred to Oregon and then decided to go back to your home state and play for the Buckeyes. You have said that playing for Kevin McGuff, I'm quoting you here, saved your career. What do you mean by that?
I stand on that to this day. Just coming back here has been a blessing. Being able to play in front of my home state fans, growing up watching Buckeye Nation, just basketball, football, whatever it may be, and then being able to be a part of that. But what was appealing to me with coming to play for Coach McGuff was the freedom that he gives his players on the court, specifically Kelsey Mitchell, and just the freedom that he allowed her to play with, knowing that I wanted to be a part of that system, and then just credit to him and the rest of the staff for bringing me in, and then the transition going so well.
You mentioned kind of saving your career, though. Like, did you feel your career was in a decline before you came to Columbus?
As a competitor, I would say no, ever, just because you feel like you're never down and out completely. But I think just taking that step, being able to bet on myself and come back home, and then having this whole university and coaching staff believe in me was something that allowed me to get back on the right side of things.
You mentioned you grew up as an Ohio State fan, couple hours from campus outside of Akron. Who were the biggest influences on your game growing up? How did you become Taylor Mikesell, basketball star?
Well, my biggest influences are obviously my parents, just with how hard they work. kind of showed me what it looks like to work hard and to achieve your goals. You have to do it the right way. And then as a basketball front, I would say just like to model my game more after like Steph Curry, Trae Young, a little bit like Kelsey Plum, playing alongside trying to model my game like players that play like me or I play like them. So just trying to follow in their footsteps.
You mentioned your dad. I know he introduced you to the game and got you into a routine where you're shooting 50 free throws a day and hitting 50 righty layups and hitting 50 lefty layups. It's one thing to kind of outline that for a young person, but it is another for them to follow through on it. What internally got you to follow through?
He would be laughing if he's watching this right now. But he gave me a little bit of a platform. He actually used to put us through like little workouts in the summer. Like I said, it was 50 free throws, 50 right-handed layups, and 50 left-handed layups. And then I kind of took it into my own thing. I fell in love with the process of working out and working hard and seeing that pay off for me on the court. It was something that I wanted to keep following through with. And then it just kind of become my peaceful time. It's been my place of peace.
Why do you say he'd be laughing?
Because he thinks I'm crazy, but I get it from him. I grew up watching him work out before he'd go to work and work a 12-hour shift, and I started doing it in high school just to follow kind of his routine, and I kind of run with it from there.
What has it meant to be closer to home, to be able to share this with your family, which is obviously so important to you?
Yeah, it's meant everything to me. I think just being able to see my family in the crowd for almost every single home game, be able to get on the highway and drive home, be home in 2 hours, and have family dinner has been a true blessing.
You had a decision to make last offseason about whether to turn pro or return for this year, and it really came down to the 11th hour for you. What ultimately swayed you to make the decision that you did?
Yeah, I mean, after the finish that we had, I think that's what we were waiting to go into media. And me and JC kind of looked at each other and we were like, we can do something really special. This could be a Final Four team, a national championship contender. Obviously I had to take a day or two, but ultimately there's why not come back to this team? Why not do something special?
Ohio State hasn't been there in 30 years, hasn't been a Final Four team. So all those things that you and JC were talking about, and I would guess that you and the rest of your teammates have been talking about subsequent to that. What do you think about when you think about being that team?
Yeah, I mean, that's the final goal, but you don't come into the season looking at the final goal. Obviously, that is your goal, and you want to achieve that, but you take it one day at a time. Try and win the next game. Try and win the next day. Try and be better in practice the next day, and I think that's been the biggest thing for us. Not necessarily skipping the process. You want to get better every single day, and you want to enjoy this time with your teammates. You got a set amount of time, a set amount of games. You got to enjoy it.
So to what extent, subsequent to those initial conversations after your loss in the NCAA tournament last year, to what extent have you guys talked about that final destination? Has Coach talked about it with you? Do you talk about it with your teammates?
Yeah, it's obviously, in the mirror ahead of us, but we're obviously looking towards Nebraska right now and then trying to stay present with the Big Ten season right now. Obviously we have a lot more to achieve and a lot more to accomplish.
Tell us a little bit about Nebraska. They were an NCAA tournament team a year ago. What are the challenges the Huskers present?
Nebraska's a really good team, and they play extremely well at home. I actually got to play with Jazz Shelley when I was at Oregon, so know her very well. But, she's an incredible point guard, and then they obviously have a very good post presence inside. So we're going to have to be locked in from the start on defense, and we're going to have to bring some energy because they're going to be everyone in that building is going to be against us.
There are so many good teams in this league, Taylor. Obviously, you talk about yourselves, and you were just mentioning Nebraska is really good, but you can kind of go through the list, obviously, of Indiana being a top 10 caliber team. Nebraska, as we said, is really good. Illinois is off to a great start this year. Maryland is perennially really good. Iowa may have one of the best players in the country, if not the best, in Caitlin Clark. As you go through this league, how do you think it prepares you for what's ahead and that postseason that you guys at least have in the back of your head?
Yeah, I think the Big Ten is the best conference in the country for women's basketball. I mean, you look at if you look at purely by rankings in top 25, I think we have the most in the top 25. But just like you said, every single game you're going to get everybody's best shot, and people are going to come ready to play. You know, there's teams on the up and up, getting better every single day. So it's going to be the most challenging game every single game.
Well, looking forward to watching the next one coming up here against the Huskers. Congratulations on all your success so far this year, and see whether or not Ohio State can indeed get it to 18-0 and beyond. Taylor Mikesell, really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
It is time to go around the Big Ten. We had some big football news yesterday. Michigan running back Blake Corum announced he is coming back for next season. The All-American ran for more than 1,400 yards this season, but was injured against Illinois, played sparingly against Ohio State before undergoing knee surgery and missing the college football playoff. Ohio State tight end Cade Stover also set to return. The simple declaration on Twitter, "I am coming back." Stover had 36 catches, 5 TDs this season, injured his back in the CFP semifinal against Georgia. Stover started his career on the defensive side of the ball before moving to tight end. Illinois gets leading receiver Isaiah Williams back, also made his announcement yesterday. He started his career as a quarterback. He was second in the Big Ten, 81 catches this year, has led the Illini in receptions each of the last 2 seasons. The new College Football Hall of Fame class includes 2 former Big Ten stars. One-time Wisconsin All-American quarterback Troy Vincent will be enshrined. Vincent, a 5-time Pro Bowler in the NFL, former head of the NFL Players Association. Big Ten honored him 5 years ago with the Ford Kinnick Leadership Award. And former Iowa offensive lineman Robert Gallery, also part of that 18-man class, which will be inducted in Vegas in December. Gallery won the Outland Trophy at Iowa, was the Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year, went on to be the number 2 overall pick in the NFL Draft. Let's go back to hoops now, and our big stat. We look at the top bench scorers in the Big Ten. Wisconsin freshman Connor Esijan leading the way, averaging in double figures, as is Jaden Epps of Illinois, Keisei Tominaga, Tamar Bates on that list as well. Those are players who have come off the bench at least 10 games this year. As Trey rejoins me, points are one way to measure it, but interested in your take, who you would rank among the top bench players in the Big Ten, starting with number 3.
I think at 3 I got Jaden Epps, and I think his ability to create his own shot, he can play catch and shoot as well. He can get off the dribble, he can play pick and roll. He has a poised, even-keeled demeanor for a freshman. He's got to do a better job of taking care of the basketball. 3 turnovers in his last 2 games per game. And so I think when I look at Jaden Epps, without Sky Clark in the lineup now, he's going to hold a lot of the bulk of the ball handling responsibilities, and I expect him to be a big factor here.
Another guy who should be as well, Sincere Harris, although he has started these last few games, but he's another one of those freshmen who, man, when he comes in, especially the defensive effort, it's just phenomenal. Who's after that? Who's number 2?
I got Connor Esijan, and I just love the fact that he's not afraid of the moment. And, you know, he's willing to take the big shot in big moments. I mean, you talk about some of the games and, you know, in overtime against Iowa, you know, he's taking big shots, and just his ability to get his shot off within the flow of that swing offense when he's coming off things, and how quickly he can get that 3-point shot off. He has to improve on putting the ball on the floor, especially with Tyler Wall out of the lineup now. He's got to be able to make plays and be a threat off the bounce. But I just love his game, love his confidence, love his swag.
Again, he can score. We knew that, right?
Yeah.
You're a top 10 scorer in the history of Indiana high school basketball. You can score,
right.
And he is in that group. It's pretty remarkable, all the good players who have come through there, through the state of Indiana. Who is number 1?
I got Malik Hall, and I mean, he's been coming off the bench since coming back from that injury, and he's been in double figures 2 of the last 3 games that he's come off the bench. And I just love the fact that, you know, he's extremely efficient. He doesn't need the ball. He can play off of other guys. You could throw the ball to him in the post. You know, he can isolate on the perimeter, just an extremely versatile offensive player, and he can guard multiple positions on the defensive end. So I think with him playing with that second lineup, when you put in Trey Holloman, Jackson Kohler, and those guys, he can kind of be the primary scorer with that second unit.
It's going to be interesting to see how long he's coming off the bench, right? And whether or not is that a reaction to just trying to bring him back slowly, or does Tom Izzo feel like, to your point, that this works with that chemistry and with some of the more inexperienced players, and having him be in that mix? It'll be fascinating to see how he handles it here down the stretch. Illinois finally got a conference win. It was an impressive one, beating Wisconsin, albeit without Tyler Wall. Now they have to go to Nebraska. Figures to be a really tough environment. What are you watching in this one?
I think even though Illinois is on the road, I really would like to see them push the tempo of the game, right? Make this a full court game, because when you look at this Nebraska team, they're more of a half court team. You know, they're second lowest tempo in the Big Ten right now. They play predominantly through Sam Griesel and Derek Walker. You know, they like to give Derek Walker the ball kind of in that free throw line area and let him operate, give Sam Griesel some post-ups. So I think it's to the advantage of the Illini to not allow Nebraska to kind of get into their half-court stuff. And when I look at Nebraska, they need more shooting from their perimeter guys. I mean, C.J. Wilcher, Tominaga, Bandamil, and those guys, they've shot under 30% in their last 3 games from 3. They need those guys to make shots to give space for their main guys in Griesel and Derek Walker. And I think for Illinois, I really like what they've done kind of within the spread offense. I think they've done a good job of kind of getting some continuity, some rhythm, some balance on the offensive end. You know, they kind of get that slice cut to start, and then they kind of isolate one side of the court where, you know, guys like Terrence Shannon Jr., Matthew Meyer can kind of operate, and then Coleman Hawkins can kind of be a pick and pop threat in that 2-man game action within the flow of the spread offense. And I think that could be effective against Nebraska, because Derek Walker is more of an inside player, and that brings him out of the paint a little bit, having to guard pick and pop actions. Coleman Hawkins had 6 threes in their last game. So I think that's an action that Illinois will especially want to run in this game.
He shot it so wonderfully against Wisconsin. It's funny, too, because Brad Underwood was saying we've essentially been begging him to shoot the ball more because he really can stretch out a defense. Should be a really compelling game tonight. Illini looking to get back-to-back wins for the first time since November. I mean, don't forget, this is the only team in the country with 2 top 10 KenPom wins. I mean, we've seen how good they can be. Now the question is, can they recapture that? What about Michigan State and Wisconsin? It seems like a lot of it depends on whether Tyler Wall plays. He reportedly has not practiced this week. That being said, with that kind of underlying all this, what do you see?
Yeah, I think, to go back to what we talked earlier in the show, Tyler Wall's absence completely changes what Wisconsin does. Wisconsin's been playing with more tempo, and they've been taking earlier shots in the shot clock than we've seen in a traditional Wisconsin team. So I think if you're Wisconsin, without Tyler Wall, you want to run your stuff, run that swing offense, get good movement, good motion, get good shots within the half court. They shot 8 of 29 from 3 last game. And I think a lot of that had to do, they took too many rush shots in that game against Illinois. And I think if you're Michigan State, you really want to push the tempo of this game, make it a full court game as well. And I think the thing that Michigan State can do is attack Wisconsin's fours, attack Carter Gilmore and pick and pop situations, make those guys guards. That's how Illinois was successful. So I think that's something that they can exploit.
You mentioned speeding up the game. You really mentioned in the context of both of these games, right? Illinois trying to speed up Nebraska, and it was interesting. We had Fred Hoiberg on yesterday, and we were talking about how much they have slowed down the tempo. I mean, it's like a completely different approach. Wisconsin historically has been a pretty methodical team offensively, as everyone who's watching certainly is well aware. We always hear it's more difficult to speed it up. How do you speed up a team if you're Michigan State or if you're Illinois trying to do that here tonight?
I think you got to pressure. You have to pick up at half court or even pick up at full court, because if you allow teams to kind of just get into their offense, get into their sets, then they feel comfortable. Then they can move the ball. Then they can cut freely. I think you have to, it starts with on the ball, but then also being physical off the ball as well. But I think especially when I look at this Wisconsin-Michigan State game, one of the things that is really compelling is the point guard play. I think Chucky Hepburn against A.J. Hoggard, because the thing that with both of these two guys is it's their team now, right? I mean, you talk about A.J. Hoggard a season ago, kind of having to share that responsibility with Tyson Walker. And then Chucky Hepburn obviously having 2 all-league guards. Now, all of a sudden, those guys are the main perimeter players, the guys that end up with the ball in their hands. And so I think this is a game where you can kind of really create confidence, and now being able to prove that you're an all-league guard in the league, in that kind of head-to-head matchup. Outside of Braden Smith, you can make the argument that these are the 2 best point guards. So I think that's going to be a compelling matchup for fans to watch.
That's pretty interesting. You would put Braden Smith in the top 3 point guards? Well, Jalen Pickett.
I'm sorry. I always forget about Pickett just because he posts up so much. He's going to back you down.
He's an unusual player. But, wow, that really speaks volumes about Braden Smith.
Yeah.
He's really good. He's had a great year. These should be fun games tonight. We look forward to talking about it again tomorrow. Trent Meacham will join me on the show. Plenty of good conversation as always. Great to have you on, Trey. Thanks so much for joining us. We will see you tomorrow on Big Ten Today.